Welcome back everyone to our third session of the Food Box program, where I teach you this week how to make a nice hearty beef stew with an apple and rhubarb crumble for dessert. So in order to get started, we're going to do our vegetable prep first. So you received in your box half of an onion, a couple potatoes, and a couple carrots. So we're going to prep these first. I'm going to start with a medium dice on the onion. I cut the ends off first, and with the ends off, it should be easy to peel that little bit of skin on the outside. Get that off. Any of this little shiny skin you can take off as well, because that actually can be quite slippery for your knife. Now take your knife, give it a horizontal cut. We don't need more than one. Turn it this way and give your onion about 3 to 4 vertical cuts. You'll notice I haven't gone all the way through. This way I can keep my onion intact. And now keep your tip on the board, and with a rocking motion you're going to create your medium dice. At the very end you'll find things kind of fall a little bit. As long as your left hand is out of the way and curled in, you won't have to worry about any knife injuries. Okay, so this onion is good to go. I'm going to move it to the side. Let's do our carrot. So carrot, we want to peel this. When it comes to a stew, we want to cut all of the vegetables into approximately the same size. That way they'll cook at about the same time. So here's our carrot. We cut the end off. In half just to make them easier to work with. For the smaller pieces, I'll cut those in half. The larger pieces, I cut them into 4. You'll find generally you want to cut your vegetables into long sticks, then you can turn them into dice. So do the same thing as your onions, and you'll notice they're about the same size as the dice of your onion. Now for our potatoes. Now you received all of these vegetables in your box unwashed, so just make sure you wash them first. Some people really enjoy the potato skins. I'm going to peel them for you right now, but if you would like to keep the skins on, you can just scrub them with a good scrubber. Now with these potatoes, to give them a good dice, I slice them in half first so they lie flat on your board. They're much easier to work with that way. Taking a look at my carrots, all I want to make sure is that they are about the same size. I'll turn those. There you are. There we go. So these are our vegetables that we are going to put in our stew in a little while. But first, we want to sear our beef. So let's get that going. In order to give our beef a flavorful crust, we're going to sear it first. So in your box, you received a little bit of shortening. This is excellent for searing because it has a very high smoking point, so there's very little chance that your oil will burn. You want to turn this on high. While this is melting, I'm going to cut up our beef. Now, you received 250 grams of stew beef in your box. It's going to take about a day in the fridge to thaw out. So let's take a look. Some of these pieces are quite large. My kids don't appreciate the really large pieces, so it's up to you what you enjoy. But I'm going to take these and cut them in half. And while I'm doing that, if there's any pieces that are tendons or anything that's a little bit tough, I can go through these and check it. Make sure everything is nice and tender, no hard pieces. Let's see. Now this cut is likely an inside or outside round. That's usually the type of cut from the cow that they use for stew beef. It's a little bit tough. If you were to make this into a steak, you would find it's quite a tough steak. So this cut of beef needs slow, long, moist cooking, which is why stewing is a really excellent idea. So the stew method, of course, is you sear it first, and then you let it slowly simmer in that liquid, whatever liquid that you choose, and it will slowly break down the connective tissue and create a really tender product. Okay, so now we can take a look at our fat. It is almost melted. It's going to sizzle. If it doesn't sizzle, it's not ready. So I'm going to take a look here, put my first piece of beef in. Can you hear that sound? We know it's ready because it's giving it a sizzle. Notice that I'm placing the beef all around the pot. I don't want to crowd the pan, or they will end up, instead of searing and creating a crust, they're going to end up just simmering in their own juices. So I'm going to just that much in a large pot would be perfect. Okay, now we just need to let this sear for a little while. Just be patient and let it create some color before you turn it. Our beef is ready. It's beautiful. It's caramelized. We can take it out of our pot now. Careful of splattering grease. I'm going to take this out. I've turned the temperature down to a minimum for now, just to avoid getting splattered. Now take a look at this. Beautiful. Of course, not tender yet. All it has is a bit of high heat. That's not going to make it tender. For now, we're going to take all of these bits. If you see in here, there's bits and a little bit of the beef, and it's very tasty. What we want to do with this is fry our onions in this to add a little bit of extra flavor. So we're going to toss the onions in. Your temperature now should be about medium. Personally, I love adding mushrooms at this stage as well, but I didn't add mushrooms because most people don't appreciate mushrooms. So for now, we'll just do onions, give it a little fry. And then let's take a look at our seasonings tonight. Minced garlic. You can add these at this time as well, 1 teaspoon. And your seasonings are in a little container in your box, or they were provided earlier, so whatever you happen to have. I believe your onion, garlic, and Italian herbs were provided earlier. I'm going to toss this together. It's starting to smell delicious. Use a flat wooden spoon to get those bits off the bottom of your pan. When your onion has picked up some of those little brown bits, it's starting to cook itself. We are ready to add our liquid. So we've got 2 cups of boiling water, and you should have received in the original package beef bouillon. I'm going to use a liquid, but you can use a powdered version as well, 2 teaspoons. Stir it into your hot water. And pour that in. Hear that sound? The French term is deglazing the pan, which simply means you take a liquid and you pick up the rest of those caramelized bits off the bottom of the pan. We're ready to add our beef back to the pan. Now this mixture is going to slowly simmer for the next 45 minutes to an hour until it's tender. I'm not going to add our carrots and our potatoes right now because they will cook very quickly. They will only need about 10 minutes. So at about 45 minutes, we're going to check the beef. If it's almost tender, we can add the rest of the vegetables. So for now, bring it to a simmer. And by simmer, I mean not a rolling boil, but just a very light, you can see some of the bubbles around the outside. I've just brought this mixture up to a boil. Take a look. Simmering, just very little bit of bubbles, actually at minimum right now. We're gonna cover it up because with it covered up, you don't have to worry about it over evaporating and not having enough liquid left. And this will simmer happily for the next 45 minutes. In the meantime, follow me to the backyard because we can get started with our dessert by picking some rhubarb. So this is my rhubarb plant here in the backyard. A lot of people in Thunder Bay have these off in the corner sometimes. They are technically a weed and they grow very easily. It turns out they're actually really delicious in dessert. So I'm gonna take one of the largest ones I can find and grab it from the bottom and give it a pull. Take the whole thing, snap off the head. We're gonna use 2 of these for our dessert tonight. You can get rid of your leaves and then we'll take these 2 inside. Our rhubarb and our apples are freshly washed. 2 apples, 2 sticks of rhubarb, 2 stalks of rhubarb that you will have in your box will serve a really healthy portion for 2 people. So we'll start with the rhubarb because it's easier. Take the ends off. These are not very tasty. I cut them about 1 centimeter thick. And your apples, I like to peel these as well. You can use a peeler or a knife, whatever's easier for you. At this point, we can cut them into quarters. I like to take a little paring knife. You can also use a steak knife, whatever you have, to get your centers out. Once again, we're not looking for perfection here. If you miss a couple skins, totally fine. A lot of the nutrients are found under the skin, so to make myself feel a little bit better, I leave a couple little skins. The same rule applies for your dessert as for your stew. When you're cutting up something for the filling, you want the 2 things to be fairly similar in size. So our apples and our rhubarb should look about the same in size. Let's take a look. About that is perfect. So I would slice each of your quarters in half one more time. There we go. In your box, you have a mixture of sugar, cinnamon, and cornstarch. So the sugar, of course, for sweetness, and the cornstarch to thicken. So I'm going to grab my mixture. We're going to take this mixture of sugar, cinnamon, and cornstarch, pour it right into your filling. Mix this together. This is very similar to the process of making an apple pie. However, you don't need lemon juice because rhubarb itself is very tart. We'll add that fabulous tartness to the apples. I'm going to mix it quite well because we want our cornstarch to be mixed very well with all of the other ingredients so that you're not left with any lumps. Now let's let that sit for a minute and make our crumble topping. You received a bowl of brown sugar, flour, a little bit more cinnamon, and oats. We're gonna put half a cup of margarine. If you'd like, you can just slice it into little slices. This helps it mix faster. And then this is my pastry blender. You can also use your fingers if you'd like to. I find this is a little bit easier. The idea is to mix the margarine in enough that you have pieces the size of little peas, like green peas. Once in a while, I take the mixture right off with your finger and keep going. I find this sort of thing quite therapeutic, actually. I'm going to switch to my fingers now so I can mix the last little bit in. This way I can actually feel when it's ready. The butter's mixing nicely in with the rest of our ingredients. The butter is now in small pieces the size of peas, and we are ready to put it on our filling. Now, you'll see there's quite a bit of this mixture here. You're not going to need it all for your crisp. Just want enough to cover the top. Any mixture that's left over, I would put it in a little baggie and freeze it. The next time you want to make this, you already have your crisp topping ready to go. Now my oven is preheated at 375 degrees. I'm going to place it in the oven now. Welcome back. It's been about 40 to 45 minutes. I'm going to take a look at this beef here. Easily pierced with a fork, but not falling apart. So this shouldn't just crumble into like little bits when I pierce it with a fork, but you should be able to poke it quite easily. So we're at that stage. Now we are ready for our vegetables. So we're going to add our carrots and our potatoes. I have put them in cold water, so I'm just going to quickly pour the water out. I'll put our potatoes in. And I'm going to save these peas. You had about a cup of peas. They're frozen peas, and by this time your peas are probably defrosted by now. I love the bright green color of peas, so we're not going to cook them for 10 minutes like the other vegetables. So we'll just leave these aside. Give this a quick stir. And then we're going to let this finish its cooking in about 10 minutes. Our dessert has 10 more minutes. This has 10 more minutes, and we will eat then. Finish up our stew then. We're on the last couple minutes now. It's simmered for 10 minutes or so. The veggies are soft. You can tell that the veggies are tender simply by piercing them with a fork. If it goes through very quickly, they're good to go. Now we're going to add our peas. Nice bright green and orange colors will make this a beautiful stew. Now, everyone got a couple teaspoons, maybe a tablespoon of cornstarch in your box. Mix this cornstarch with about 200 milliliters of water or 3/4 of a cup. And in this case, the water can be cold. This is what we're going to use to thicken our stew. Now, a lot of people make stew with flour near the beginning, where they'll mix the flour into the butter, like I taught when we did our Italian night, and we did the roux mixed with butter and flour, and then we added our milk to make our white sauce. So tonight we're going to do something a little bit different, because with stew, you might have someone in your group or in your family that can't have flour, that's gluten-free. So I like to do cornstarch to thicken, as this is a gluten-free option. Okay, this has come back to a boil. I'm gonna pour our cornstarch water mixture in. We're going to allow this to come back to a boil. As it comes back to a boil, the cornstarch will slowly thicken. Let's see what's happening right now. I would let this simmer for about 5 more minutes. It can cook out any of the starchy flavors, and I will taste test at this point. Got a lot of good flavor in there. I'm going to add some salt and some black pepper. And salt and pepper is simply to your taste. You can taste test one more time. It's very good. We are now ready to take out the dessert. It has been about 35 minutes at 375. You can see that it's bubbling around the edges. It's thickened up nicely. The top is nice and caramelized and brown. I'm going to poke it with a fork once again. If the fork goes in easily, then it's ready. I'm going to serve these little desserts up. And let's serve our dinner. From what I can see here, we've got a hearty 4 servings of stew and 4 servings of dessert. Enjoy.